We're going to wrap up this lesson 4.2 by looking at graphs of functions and finding out what they mean. How do we find the values when we're given a function direction? So let's remember a couple of things before we get started. When graphing a function, and I apologize, there is supposed to be the comma is supposed to be on that side. X is the input, are also called the independent variable. And it's the independent one because usually we say, okay, here's what X is. Now tell me what Y is. So that's going to make the f of X the output or the dependent variable. Now, just a moment ago, I called f of X or the output the Y, and that's true on a graph. This is so important to remember on a graph that f of x is the same as the y value. So just know whenever it asks for f of x, it's really just asking for y. Let's take a look at this example here. It says, given this graph of the function f of x, find the following values. So here's a graph of some crazy function. It's even got a break in it. So this is a very unique function. But I want to find f of -4. What this means is that x equals -4. So I'm going to go to my graph. I'm going to go to -4 right here. And I just want to find, remember this is f of anything means to find the y value. And we can see that the y value is 3. So let's do a couple more of those. On our next one, it says f of 0. So that means that the x value equals 0. When I go to the graph right here is where f equals 0, or sorry, x equals 0. And we can see that our y value is -2. All right, before C here, I want you to go ahead and try it on your own. It does say to estimate. You're not going to get a whole number here, but it's okay to just go ahead and round and give it your best guess. So this means that x is to equal 3. When I look at the graph, I'd say it's about 2.5 or 2.5. So that's what I'm going to put for it, about 2.5. The last one, I really wanted to push you and get you to think a little bit. If x equals -5, when I look on this graph, okay, when I look at this graph and I go out to -5, there is no y value. So we actually would say does not exist. There is no value there. No solution would also be okay there. So that would also be a fine answer. Really does not exist because it makes a little more sense because there's no y value there. Also in math, sometimes we abbreviate that as DNE, does not exist. So let's revisit what f of x means for this next one. And I said that up above here, that f of x is the y value. So what this problem is saying is that y equals -2. So when I go to my graph to -2, I'm actually asking for the x value. The x value here would be 0. For example, f, it's asking when y equals 2, what are our values? So let's take a look at our graph here. And I'm going to go to y equals 2, which is right here. If I go over to the left, I can see my x value here is -2. But you have to be careful because if you notice, if I go to y equals 2, I go to the right, I have a second value. And that's at about 3.5. So I'm going to put 3.5, as it does say to estimate. There are two possibilities. Sometimes there are more than, there's many possibilities when we do it this direction and it's a function. When you're finding the y value, there should only ever be one answer. I want you to go ahead and see if you can find the value or values for example G. Example G is asking us to find um, the values of x when y equals 3. So here's y equals 3. If I go over to the left side, I can see that x equals -4. Now, if I go over to the right this time, there is this point right here, but notice it's an open circle. That means it doesn't actually equal it. Okay, so that's it. It's just -4. It is not +2. And I just want to mention really quickly, and I didn't ask it, and I probably should have, if I had asked for f of 2, the answer would be 1. So the y value here at x equals 2, the y value would be 1. It would not be 3 because 3 is an open circle. It does not equal the function at that point. It only equals at this point down here. So be careful of those open and closed circles. Right, these last two questions are review about finding our domain and range of a function. So the domain, those are going to be our x values, or our furthest point to the left here is -4. There's a closed circle, so that's less than or equal to. We can see our x values. They're represented on the graph until we get to right here, which is +4. So -4 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 4. For the range of values, we're going to look at the graph from the bottom, so on the y-axis. So our graph starts right here at -2. It's going to be less than or equal to the y values. Um, those are the range values. We can see this graph ends right here. It tops out, the top part is 3. So that'll be less than or equal to 3. Now it is less than or equal to because we do have the closed point here. Even though this point's not closed, this one is. So it does actually reach 3 at -4.